Inc., the business of Shaquille O'Neal. And so I just recently interviewed him, and I actually asked him about Caitlin Clark, and he had an interesting take on it, which he said the tension in the league right now is not racially motivated tension, it's not political tension, it's a rite of passage that she is going to be the face of the league, but the existing veteran players are not going to let her until she basically goes through this on-the-court hazing ritual. And
what transpired after the whistle blew is more shocking than the fact that this game got heated. The WNBA abruptly became a courtroom after a vicious collision involving DJ Carrington and Sophie Cunningham. Caitlin Clark somehow found herself at the center of the controversy, and Shaq O'Neal added his voice. However, this is when things go crazy. Did the officials make a decision that might alter the entire discourse, or was this just basketball becoming physical? You'll understand why everyone began to raise questions after you see what transpired next.
Take a walk with me. There is craziness going on in the WNBA. Djonai Carrington tweeted out white privilege from the locker room of a game that she was playing in. Get this, she fouls Sophie Cunningham hard. Sophie Cunningham, obviously a white person, fouls her hard. Flagrant 2, gets ejected, goes to the locker room and tweets out white privilege in the middle of the game. Now here's the kicker to me. A flagrant 2 has to be contact that can lead to an injury that looks excessive. Djonai, it was about as excessive as possible. If there was any evidence of there being white privilege, this was not it. What the hell do you...
Even if the game had already become physical, DJ Carrington elevated it to a whole new level. Everyone in the building reacted instantly when Carrington collided with Sophie Cunningham as she was moving through the performance.
Walking in for a layup, and so I don't oppose the hard foul, but I also don't think that she intentionally went for the net.
Stephanie White, we shouldn't be surprised. This is somebody who has come out and admitted publicly that she's uneducated on the difference between male and female. She's uneducated on. So are we really surprised that this is Stephanie White's thought process here? I've been saying Stephanie needs to be fired for over a year. The reason she never defends Caitlin is because she agrees with the rough play. In fact, she taught Djonai and AT how to play this way.
Many people who watched the footage thought it was far more serious than a typical basketball play, and the impact near Cunningham's upper body made the moment more startling. In a way, the hit was only the start. Because while supporters were waiting to see if Cunningham's own team would support her right away, another aspect of the tale began to draw criticism.
Felt that Caitlin put a little extra sauce on the forearm when she ran into that official. Did the league get this right, rescinding the technical foul?
Can we see it again? Team crew in the control room, can I see it again? Because you all watched this in real time.
Yeah.
You all watched this happen in real time. I was surprised that a technical foul was called.
Because for that action being minimal, like a brush, this is what should have happened and the right thing happened. What? What is
all I'm saying is I have flashbacks to college when my teammate bumped into a coach like this and it was a problem.
Where your teammate did what?
Bumped into one of our coaches this way and it was a problem. But I think when we analyze it, if Caitlin didn't say anything, it is marginal. I think rescinding it was fine. But I do understand in the moment how we got here.
In contrast to what many would have anticipated, Stephanie White did not exactly storm onto the court in a dramatic display of support. Abruptly, the topic of discussion changed from what transpired between the players to how the team dealt with what followed.
Sophie Cunningham was going to be the next target. I've been telling you guys for weeks. Sophie would take the role of Caitlin Clark as public enemy number 1 in the WNBA dump. And yesterday was the first attack. You know, I wasn't able to predict this because I'm some brilliant scholar or philosopher. This prediction was not delivered to me in a dream or a vision that came from the dearly departed.
However, Carrington's response added to the intrigue of the issue. Carrington didn't appear to be someone who had just committed a very clear foul. Instead, he seemed to have a completely different perspective on the whole thing. The way she talked about the play later made some fans question whether she really thought the contact was just a typical aspect of basketball, which only served to stoke the flames. This is the point at which the story becomes intriguing. Because the explanation that followed made the collision, which was already problematic, considerably more contentious. One foul was no longer the only point of contention among the fans. They were discussing intent, responsibility, officiating, and if some players receive preferential treatment when a WNBA game suddenly becomes really hot. And suppose DJ Carrington was kicked out of the game. Everything got worse after that. Before teammates and Fever security intervened to separate them, Sophie Cunningham, who had already taken the brunt of the contact and struck the floor hard, stood up and started at Carrington. The crowd's response only heightened the situation as Carrington moved in the direction of the tunnel.
Take this play successfully, right? Trying to get a block over the top. It was a very hard foul. Djonai has made this play successfully so many times throughout her career. No matter what team she has played on, we have seen Djonai make transition blocks.
Right.
So to me, I understand it was called a flagrant 2. I wouldn't have been mad if it was called a flagrant 1 because I do think she was making a basketball play.
However, the night's most explosive event took place outside of the arena. It took place on the internet. Carrington wrote the phrase, "white privilege," and tagged the Indiana University just minutes after the dismissal. According to the transcript, the post was made while the game was still in progress, some 8 minutes after the foul. The entire conversation abruptly altered. Because a hard foul was no longer the only issue. It has to do with intent, interpretation, and everything related to it. At that point, the dispute escalated beyond a single play and ceased to be a typical basketball debate. A number of them openly defended Sophie Cunningham, arguing that although the contact she encountered was typical for a competitive game, the response and build-up around it seemed excessive. Others supported DJ Carrington, claiming that emotional responses to rejection are nothing new and that physical defense is a necessary component of the game. However, the NBA Voice's most recurring issue was officiating rather than taking sides. An increasing number of gamers started expressing the same idea in various ways. There is inconsistency in the standard. They noted that, depending on the situation, comparable plays in the NBA frequently result in flagrant or common fouls. However, the meaning appears to vary greatly from game to game in the WNBA. They contended that this discrepancy is what leads to annoyance and ultimately public outbursts like this one.
Carrington's foul was upgraded to a flagrant 2 on Sophie Cunningham. She was ultimately ejected from the game against the Indiana Fever. Then she takes to the locker room, and the first thing she does is run to Twitter and say, "white privilege." Where's the white privilege in this? I'm watching the game, Sophie Cunningham going on a fast break, and again, Djonai Carrington, you're not going for the ball. You literally went straight for her cranium. So I don't know why you sitting here screaming white privilege after that. Don't deflect from the malicious, the blatant, and overly aggressive foul that you just created. That again, if the WNBA does not suspend you for multiple games.
Some NBA veterans even went so far as to claim that players like Cunningham and Carrington are placed in unfeasible circumstances where physical defense is praised before it is abruptly penalized without any explanation. Particularly among players who have witnessed the WNBA's rise in prominence during the past 2 seasons, that sentiment swiftly gained traction. Then, when past disputes were brought back into the public eye, the discussion took a different path. Fans and analysts cited Caitlin Clark's suspension as part of a wider trend of officiating misunderstanding, making it one of the more startling talking topics that reappeared online. The conversation going around in the context of the transcript claims that Clark was suspended following an incident in which she allegedly shoved a referee at a tense time during a game. There was an instant and conflicting response to such suspension. Regardless of the situation, critics saw it as a distinct boundary that should never be crossed. And now that the Carrington-Cunningham episode was taking place, those old arguments suddenly resurfaced. NBA players who have previously discussed officiating fairness started making the connections in public. As a result, every harsh foul in the league turns into a fairness referendum, and that is precisely what occurred in this instance. Supporters of Sophie Cunningham contend that she was only playing aggressive basketball when things got out of hand. Supporters of DJ Carrington contend that rather than intending to escalate, her post was an emotional reaction to a hostile environment and a physical play. The rationale behind my
saw this coming is because I have been seeing this same thing in this toxic turd of a league for years. As I am watching the reactions on social media yesterday of Djonai Carrington assaulting Sophie Cunningham, and that's what this was. Assault. This was not incidental contact in the rhythm of a basketball game, mainly because the WNBA is not a basketball league. What you saw yesterday, that was intentional assault.
However, the tone was altered once more as NBA voices entered the discussion. People listen differently when players who have dealt with playoff-level physicality for years begin to remark, "This doesn't look consistent." Some of them explicitly state that the WNBA is going through a transitional phase in which growing popularity, particularly around celebrities like Caitlin Clark, has magnified every decision made by officials. They contend that the spotlight is bringing to light issues that have always existed but were never given as much attention. And that's where the current indignation is coming from. Not just from a single club or fan base, but from an increasing number of players, commentators, and past pros. And because Cunningham is at the heart of the most recent flashpoint, her involvement connects everything. The league now has to cope with the fallout from a dispute that has already transcended the court's limits, which makes the upcoming chapter even more crucial. The WNBA was no longer dealing with a straightforward officiating judgment once social media became involved. The officials made their decision during the game. It involved juggling conflicting interpretations of intent, fairness, identity, and accountability, all of which can become far more difficult to manage once millions of supporters have made a decision.
Indiana Fever games, like, I don't know if I love them or I hate them at times. It's like if you like anything about reality TV, then the WNBA is, and sports, then the WNBA is for you. Sometimes it gets to be way too much, and this season, I gotta say, I've gotten to that place multiple times. But this game, like, I mean, love it or hate it, you can't say that you could have taken your eyes off of it for any second. The Indiana Fever came in against the Chicago Sky, playing on their home turf. And listen, the Chicago Sky have been a very bad team, but have also taken teams to the wire, like the Minnesota Lynx, nearly beating them.
The league's greatest obstacle is that consistency cannot be achieved by merely making the same decision every time anything goes wrong. It entails setting a benchmark that players, coaches, and spectators can comprehend prior to the next contentious play. Players must understand why a certain kind of contact will result in an ejection, and the league must be able to explain why a similar form of contact in another game will result in a different outcome without requiring everyone to fill in the blanks. The WNBA operates in a time when practically every major officiating is more challenging, therefore timing is equally important. Because a referee's decision-making is no longer limited to an arena. Before the players have even entered the locker room, the choice could become the focal point of a national debate. Because of this, the league cannot afford to handle disputes like this as one-time occurrences that just vanish as the next game starts. Every choice made in the future will be evaluated in light of players' and fans' perceptions of a trend of uneven enforcement. The crowd may recall a different call from weeks or years ago, so even if a referee makes the right choice, they may still be criticized. It is far more difficult to build trust in that setting.